Hi, I'm Karin Hurt, and welcome to our next edition of Asking for a Friend Live. I'm absolutely delighted today to bring Liz Wiseman on, and she has this incredible new book called Impact Players. And it's how to take the lead, play bigger, and multiply your impact. So welcome, Liz, to the show. We're so delighted that you're here.
Oh, Karin, it's good to be here for so many reasons. I'm going to enjoy this conversation with you.
Oh, I know we're going to have a lot of fun. And I really encourage people as they're listening, please chime in your questions. We want to make this a robust conversation. Liz, I was telling you before the show, I read a lot of books. I have a lot of guests, and it's seldom that I read the book and say, oh my gosh, this book needed to be written. And so I really, really feel that way. So, I was thinking about, my career and the people that I would consider to be impact players. So I'm like, what is it that Wayne Smith or Jimmy English, like, what are people like Jonathan Green, Jada, how did they show up? What was the thing that they had? And I believe that that's what you're describing here.
Yeah, in some ways, the book is trying to describe what has felt indescribable, like a je ne sais quoi. It's like, I don't know. It's like, because you ask managers, like, who are the people you turn to in the most critical situations? Who are the people you entrust with the most important work? And they know right away. Like you said, oh, it's Wayne, or it's Susan, it's Karin. But why?
Right.
What is it? And in many ways, they were somewhat small differences that end up making a really big impact. So it was a little elusive, but it was a fun project. And I'm mostly glad that it's done and it's in other people's hands, not mine.
Yeah. So let's talk about it's research based. So this isn't just your theory. You went through a really extensive process to come up with these behaviors. So can you tell us a little bit about the research?
Yeah. So what we did is my team and I went out we started in 9 companies, and it was, let me see, Adobe, LinkedIn, Google, SAP, Splunk, Salesforce, Target, NASA, and Stanford Healthcare. And we went in and interviewed 25 managers in each of these companies. So it was 170 people in all. And we asked these managers to describe 2 contributors, someone that they were currently managing or historically had managed or had worked with. One who was smart, hardworking, capable, and doing well. And the other that was smart, hardworking, capable, but making an extraordinary impact. So we're trying to isolate capability and really looking at what's the difference in work approach and practices and mindsets that cause some people to be so impactful. And then, boy, we just, I really dug into how do they think, what do they do, what do they not do, what do they do differently than others, what's the value of the work that they're contributing. And then, like, the little bonus piece on the research was asking 170 managers in general, what is it that people do that you kind of resent, that really bugs you, that makes it hard for you to be a good leader? Because I'm looking for what are the ineffective behaviors and what are the things people are doing that reduce their credibility with their leaders and their stakeholders. And then I got to ask 170 managers, what is it that people do that you love, that makes your job, like, not just easy, but delightful and allows the whole team to do great work? And that was honestly my favorite part of the research.
Nice. So you have 5 different behaviors, and I'd like just to go through each one of them and you give us your very best insights of, how what does this look like? How do you show up doing these things? Because you've got some really specific examples here, and I think that would be really good. I see we have a lot of people chiming in and saying good morning. If you have a question for Liz, please feel free to just type that in, and we'll be sure to get to as many as possible. So let's start with do the job that's needed. So describe what that looks like.
Well, when we found that what really separates what I call ordinary contributors from the impact players is how they handle the messy stuff, the stuff that is ambiguous and uncertain and chaotic, that these ordinary contributors, they did their job, they took ownership, they followed direction, they were focused, they carried their weights on teams. But when things got ambiguous and messy, they fell short. They were stellar in ordinary times, but fell short when things were uncertain and ambiguous. And the first of those situations was messy problems when, there's something that needs to be done and it's not her job, it's not his job, it doesn't belong in this department or that department. It's kind of out in no man's land. And I actually think that most of the important work inside organizations today don't line up well with the org chart.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, what do you do when the work is kind of out in this messy middle? And what we find is that most people do their job. They're like, this is my job. I jump on it if it's kind of in my boundaries or in my range. Whereas the impact players, they don't just do their job, they do the job that needs to be done. They're treating their job descriptions kind of as guidelines. Like they don't over rotate on it. They don't take it too seriously. It's more like the job description is a base camp. Like this is kind of where I hang out in normal times. I do my work. But when there's kind of an emergency up on the hill, like we move off of base camp and we go and do it. So they're kind of rangy, and they go and move. They serve where they're needed.
I love that. It's interesting. I was teaching in an evening MBA class at one point, and this woman said, I am an amateur opera singer, and then I have this day job. Well, my boss asked me if I would sing at this event that we're having. No way am I going to do that. That's not in my job description. I don't get paid for that. And I'm thinking, oh no, you are. And I tried to coach her, but she was uncoachable about that. She's like, he would need to pay me extra to do that.
And it's funny. I can't really even carry a tune. And I would have been like, I'll sing. Company holiday party, you need an opera singer. Pick me. No, it is like they serve where they're needed. And one of my favorite examples of this was a scrub tech at an academic hospital. His name is Jojo Mirador. He's a scrub tech, and his job is to have all the surgical instruments ready to go, sterilized, and then to hand them to the surgeon during an operation. And, that's what most scrub techs do, is they hand over the requested instrument. But Jojo kind of handles things differently. Like he's not just listening for the requested instrument. During the surgery, he's watching the surgeon's hands. Mm-hmm. Like, what is the surgeon doing? What is her next move? What's happening next? What is like he trying to hold back there? And then when he is asked for an instrument, he doesn't always just hand the instrument that he's been asked for. He hands the one he knows the surgeon actually needs. Yeah. And then he offers it with a gentle suggestion, which is, why don't you try this one? This one might work better. This is an academic hospital, which means that there are surgeons in training.
Yeah.
And, there are young surgeons who are just learning how to do their job well. And you can imagine how grateful they are that he doesn't just do his job, that he's willing to step out and do the job that needs to be done and help somebody else do their job. And even the most senior of surgeons, they don't resent his suggestions. In fact, they seek him out. Often before surgeries, they'll come and talk, Jojo, what do you think we should use here? We've got a tricky part of this. What kind of tool will help us with this move?
And I would imagine when that surgeon walks in and they say he's their guy that day, they're like, oh, good.
So Karin, it actually goes beyond this. I kind of talked to a number of people there. Turns out there's a lot of contention around who gets to have Jojo.
Oh.
So the surgical teams will line up like outside of the scheduler's office to say, no, we need Jojo. No, we need Jojo. And they've got this like little protocol that whoever has the most complex procedure is the one that gets Jojo.
Nice. Okay, let's do step up, step back. That was interesting. And that's all about leadership.
Well, and it's about how willing people are to lead, but also how willing people are to follow. And so the situation here where we really see this difference between ordinary contributors and the impact players is how they handle leaderless situations, when roles are unclear. And this is one of the everyday problems of the workplace. Well, we're working together, but am I in charge? Is he in charge? Like, who's leading this meeting? We're all kind of working together. So we're constantly in these situations where somebody needs to emerge as the leader. And what we find is that the ordinary contributor, or I should say, those of us when we're working in this kind of ordinary contributor mindset, it's more about mindsets than people. But when we're in this mindset, we wait for direction. Like, okay, will someone please clarify who's in charge? And we tend to look upward for that direction. Whereas the impact players, when they encounter these leadership vacuums, they just step in. And it's not that they're constantly making land grabs or that they have to always be the leader, but when there's an opportunity to serve and there's an opportunity, the group needs a leader, the meeting needs a boss, they jump in and they step in very willingly. They don't wait to be asked. They don't wait for formal authority. They often don't wait for an invitation. Yeah. It's like, oh, you know what? This group is going to need my help. Let me show up. But it's not like they insist on leading forever. They step in, they lead, and then they roll back. And what we found that I thought was so inspiring is that they lead easily, but they also follow easily. That they're like, in a given day, it might be that they go into a 2:00 meeting where they're the project leader and they lead, they're assertive, they're great leaders. But then when that meeting's over, they walk down the hall or click on the next link and they follow and are a participant and an active, energetic participant as comfortably as they are the leader. And like they follow their peers, they are willing to follow people who maybe work for them in a formal organization. It's like they move fluidly in and out of this leadership role.
Because it's about the agenda, not about them, right? It's
it's done in service. Like the group needs a leader. I will be the leader the group needs.
Yeah. It was interesting as I was reading your book, I was thinking about two managers that I worked with for at various points in my career and pretty early in my career, where I felt like they were people who developed impact leaders. And there were two things and particularly in this step up, step back, because I feel like they taught me that skill. And one was Gail Parsons, and she was a senior vice president of human resources when I was in HR. And she would say, where there is chaos, seize control.
Oh, love that. Someone write that down in chat or in comments. Where there is chaos, seize control. It is like the mantra of the impact player.
Yeah. And then the other one was Ray Davidson. And I learned so much from him, but he said, be like Men in Black. And he said, when Men in Black, something good happened, but it's that nobody actually knew who did it. It doesn't matter. Don't worry about the credit. Just go do good. And I thought that is also so important. And that's where that humility to be able to step back and just let the magic happen.
Mm-hmm. Well, and Karin, you bring up an interesting issue, because there's a part of me that wants to say, yeah, of course, like, don't worry who gets the credit. But there is a troublesome little issue here in that there are people who are these kind of willing contributors and quiet contributors, and they can go unnoticed in organizations, and they can go underseen, underappreciated, under-recognized, under-compensated, and rewarded. So that's a topic worth exploring.
Yeah, I would agree. And, the interesting thing about Ray is he also said, I should add this, and I will have your back. And working for Ray, I did get promoted to my very first executive role. So he was right? He's like, but don't be the person who needs to have the spotlight. Let other people take care of that. So we have a few questions coming in. So I'd like to, Jared, can you pull up Ryan's question? I'm curious about how much of the traits of an impact player can be learned through experience or are more just innate to the employee. But Ryan, this is so interesting. Liz and I were talking about this very question right before we started the show. So I think this is a fantastic question. And what type of interview questions would you use to identify these traits in a potential employee?
Ryan, I am glad that you asked this. This is one of the parts of the book where I was ready to be done. And I'm like, okay, I've done the research. I know what this looks like. And then I'm like, oh man, somebody's going to ask, like, which of these can you actually hire for them and how do you find them? And I wanted to be done. and call it a day on the research, but I ended up deciding to like maybe finish a little bit stronger than that. So it's in the book, and man, if anyone wants it, like if I don't want anyone to feel like they have to run out and go get a book, but it's on page 239 of the book. If you don't want to get a book, don't want to read the book and you just want it, just send me an email, info@thewisemangroup.com. I'll send it to you. And what I've done is taken all of the mindsets and the practices of impact players. And then we went out to a group of 100 executive coaches, all very senior, global, very, very experienced executive coaches, and said, based on your coaching experience, which one of these are very difficult to learn, they're quite innate, or they're actually pretty easy for people to learn, and you've had success coaching people on this mindset or this practice. And this chart lays them out from the least coachable to the most coachable. You don't even have to wait for the chart. I'll just tell you a few of them. Things that are harder to coach, according to this group of executive coaches, having an internal locus of control. And I would very much agree with that. Like this sense of I am in charge of me, that I am not really like a victim of, other people's whims, that I can control outcomes in my life. A sense of informality, this kind of belief that I don't need to be in charge to take charge, that I don't have to have formal authority, like this sense of, where there's a little bit of chaos, step in and assert some control. Mm-hmm. Like a sense of what I call an opportunity lens, which is to look at uncertainty and ambiguity. And instead of seeing that uncertainty and seeing a threat that we avoid or we run from, it's seeing opportunity in those situations. The metaphor I like to use is like, when two different people see a bee, some people see a bee, fear a swarm of bees, and they run. Whereas some people see that same bee and they go, this is an opportunity to make honey. Let's build a hive. Now, if you're deathly allergic to bees, I'm sorry for this metaphor, but it's this opportunity orientation.
Yeah, thank you. I think that, John, that gets to a bit of your question. Are there predictors in hiring? And I think so. How do you begin to look for some of those indicators? Liz, I want to also talk about some of these other ones, because finish stronger. And it's my last guest on Asking for a Friend was Kurt Madden, and he's this ultra Ironman world champion, everything. He's won so many triathlons. It's amazing. At any rate, I was telling him about your book because he's also a client. And he texted me after his last triathlon, and he said, just like Liz Wiseman said, I'm finishing stronger, which I was laughing because he already knew how to finish strong. But what do you mean by finish stronger?
Well, we definitely don't mean run triathlons, win them. Like, I can't finish stronger this way. Like those I finished just, yeah. In fact, I have a marathon story of me trying to finish a marathon. Okay, let me start with my bad marathon. So I did an obligatory, midlife obligatory marathon, and I had trained for it, and I just I knew what pace I was going to run at, and I was hoping to finish it at like 4 hours, 20 minutes, and not a great time, not a winning time, but and I ended up getting overexcited in the first half of this and picked up my pace, took a minute off my mile time, and then suffered at the end. And I finished this, but it was 4 hours, 30 minutes. So I was off by 10 minutes, but man, was that last part painful.
Yeah.
Because I didn't pace myself. And this is kind of one of the principles behind this is when unforeseen obstacles just drop in uninvited and unannounced, like things can get pretty messy. And a lot of people start strong, and the ordinary contributors start strong. They take ownership. But when something unreasonable drops in their way, they tend to escalate up, which is what they've been taught to do. We have all these escalation procedures inside big companies. And so what they do is they're like, oh, this one's beyond me. Let me pass it to someone who's got the power, the control, the resources to fix this. Whereas the impact players, they tend to just hold on to that ownership, and they get things across the finish line. They have this completion gene that says, keep going. But here's the important part. It's not that they finish at all costs. It's not like, okay, I'm going to get this done. I couldn't have predicted a global pandemic and a recession and all of these, situations. And so I'm just going to like drag this thing across the finish line, have success and collapse, and then be bitter and resentful.
Yeah. Yeah.
They finish stronger, meaning they don't go it alone. Let's say someone else might escalate to a senior VP. They will involve that senior VP, but they don't hand it off. They're still holding on to the ownership, but they're like, hey, you know what? Marion, I need your help. Can you join us on this? We might need some help with this. And they're pulling the team together. And like my mascot for this practice would be the Husky Malamute, which is, this breed of sled dog that can finish this multi-day endurance challenge with the same vital signs and the same kind of health and strength at which it started the challenge.
Yeah.
And in fact, they find that the sled teams are that finish one race are often the teams of dogs that have just completed a previous race. Like that endurance challenge actually makes them stronger and more fit for the next one. It's team-based. It's pacing. It's not me with the marathon.
So thank you. So John Haverly, I see that you are here and it's good to see you. I haven't talked to you in a while. What factors should contributors consider when determining situations where they should step up and step back? In other words, how do you know when to do that? And how do you know when to stay in your lane so you don't tick off your peers?
Oh, I love this question from John Haverly, who is one of our master practitioners for multipliers. And I so want to say, John, I know you well, and I have a feeling you know the answer to this question. I always want John to come on because I think it's very much like the role of a leader when a leader's in a meeting and they're getting what they want, meaning people are engaging and ideas are flowing. It's a great signal that it's okay for them to step back and kind of play small. But where ideas aren't starting to flow and problems aren't getting solved, like that's a good time for the leader to come in and play a strong leadership role, ask a question, set some ground rules, kind of stoke that interaction a little bit. And I think the same principle probably holds true here, which is like when a situation is lacking leadership and it's something where you can contribute and where you have permission to lead, not authority to lead, but permission to lead, which is different. It might be as simple as saying, oh, you know what, who's in charge of this meeting? No one. Okay. Would it be helpful if I kind of like set an agenda for us and facilitate this conversation? Like that's garnering permission to lead. Or, hey, I would love to lead this project, and so it's checking to make sure we have support. But then once that job is done, it's like, okay, I fulfilled my stated role. Let me step back. But it's also looking for signs that somebody else is willing to or able to step up. I think it's, this model of leadership is very much like this rotating model, in some ways like we did in first grade, where, there was a different hall monitor, each week, and we shared that leadership. There's someone else to come in and take over.
Nice. Simone, I see that you are on. And so I know particularly you're going to like this one, which is ask and adjust. And Liz, you talk about ways to ask for feedback so that you don't become annoying. Like one of those people that is always like, oh, am I doing all right? So can you give some really practical techniques of how do you ask for feedback? How do you adjust? How do you be in that growth mindset in a way that makes people feel like you're really and doing this from a good place and getting the feedback that you need to continue to adjust?
Well, we found that the impact players had such a different orientation to change. Whereas most people are kind of trying to manage change and minimize change, the impact player is adapting and adjusting. And it's like the orientation would be that they go to sleep, they wake up, and they start their new day at work with the assumption that overnight the world has shifted a little bit. Things have changed. That project that they were working on, they can't just pick up exactly where they left off, that maybe there's been some changes. Now, I don't know that the world moves quite that fast, but it is this orientation that, boy, I'm probably constantly getting off track unless I'm doing something to constantly get myself back on track, because I think, as we all feel, the world is moving really fast right now. So their orientation to feedback tends to be different. They see feedback as information, not as an evaluation. Like, it's information, and it's not information about them. It's information about their work. So as other people might be looking for affirmation that they're doing it well, or getting feedback personally. How am I doing, boss? Am I doing great? How am I now? How am I now? Am I doing great now? They're looking for information to help them adjust their work. So it's very depersonalized. It's, give me information about my work so I can recalibrate it and get the work on target, which makes it so much easier to hear feedback when it's not, how did I do? Versus, John Haverly is one of the people who reviewed the book. He's one of my favorite reviewers because he helps me make the work better rather than telling me how I did. So it's easier to receive that kind of feedback, but it's so much easier to give.
Yeah.
Like, there's nothing like the panic of when someone pops in your office and say, hey, do you have any feedback for me? And like, oh, for like you, like,
it's not specific. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, it's sort of hard. And people, I think managers don't like that condemnation that often you feel like when you offer anything that feels critical.
Yeah.
And so it's so much easier if someone pops in your office and say, hey, you know what, here's a presentation I just created. Is there anything you see that could make this presentation stronger?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
That's easy to do.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, Simone. Yes, it starts with mindset. Situational adaptability is also key. Yeah. Okay. I have to make sure before we end, we go to your favorite one, which is make work light. So let's talk about that.
Oh man, when just workload is heavy, most people are carrying their weight, but what we find the impact players do differently, and particularly in the most difficult times, is they aren't asking for help. They aren't adding to the burden. They're making work lighter for other people. And it's not that they're taking work off of other people's plates. It's that they don't make hard work harder. They're easy to work with. They're low maintenance. They bring a sense of levity. They're fun. They're people who reduce the phantom workload, politics, drama, people issues, friction. They just don't engage in that part of the work.
Yeah.
And they bring a sense of levity, which is like, what we're doing is hard, so let's just not make it harder. They're lighthearted. And they're people who is really a joy to work with.
Yeah. I was thinking back about, as I was reading all the chapters, I was thinking of people who exhibited these characteristics. And then when I got to this make work light, I had this flood of PTSD of people who did not make work light. And they were strong contributors in some ways. But, when I saw them coming towards my office, I'd be like, oh no.
Right. No, these are really, you're like, I don't have time for this. I don't have energy for this. Like, this just added a half an hour to my day.
Right. Yes. Employees that are better with self-management and accountability will also become the ones that will eventually emerge on new and future leaders. And so you just want to comment on that, because I think that's also part of what you are very clear about in your book. It's not just about making an impact and not worrying about your career, that this is a way to also accelerate your career. What would you respond here to Anthony?
Well,
it looks like we may have had a bit of a technological delay. So I just want to, I really do think that this is a way to think about this and in your total career. So as we're, Jared, are we able to get Liz back, or looks like okay. Well, thank you so much for joining us on Asking for a Friend. Again, if you are just there you are. Now you're back. We lost you if you were commenting on Anthony.
I'll just say Anthony's right.
Okay. All right. All right. Well, Liz, it has been an absolute pleasure to have you on the show today. If you missed it, her book is Impact Players. I highly recommend it, filled with very, very practical ways to do this, guardrails to think about how to do this well. So, Liz, thank you so much again for your time today and your wonderful insights.
Well, Karin, good to be here. And you know, I admire you as a leader, and it was such an honor to award to you the Multiplier of the Year award back in 2013. So,
oh, thank you. That was back in my Verizon days, and that meant so much to me. So thank you so much. That's Liz's first book was Multipliers. So also a great read. All right. Thank you so much. And next time on Asking for a Friend, we are going to be talking with Andy Thomas and Jessica Schwaller, K-Force, very much human-centered leaders. And they're going to talk about how do you help your leaders grow leaders. So we hope you will join us on at next edition of Asking for a Friend.